The sound of Italian leather heels echoed on the marble floors of the imposing corporate building in downtown Chicago. At 45, Julian Grant walked with the straight posture and confident gaze of a man who had earned every inch of his empire. He was the face of Grant Enterprises, one of the biggest real estate firms in the United States. But on that Monday morning, his meticulously planned routine was about to be completely shattered by a revelation that would change his life forever. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," greeted Brenda, his longtime executive assistant, as he strode past the luxurious reception area, decorated with awards and accolades. "Good morning, Brenda. Anything new for today?" he asked, adjusting the platinum watch on his wrist. "Just your scheduled meetings and—" She hesitated, checking a note. "There's a woman waiting in the small conference room. She said it's a personal and urgent matter." Julian frowned. Personal matters were not part of his routine. Family was a word that held limited meaning for him. An only child of absent parents, and then an orphan at age 8, he was raised by his aunt Eleanor, his only living relative. "I don't have anything scheduled." "Who is it?" "A woman named Maria. She wouldn't give any details but insisted it was about your family." "She's been waiting for almost an hour." Julian stopped. His only known family was Eleanor. What could a stranger want? Send her away. "She must be a scam artist," he replied dryly. "Sir," Brenda interrupted, "a rare occurrence. She brought some old documents. They look official." "She mentioned your father's name." The name of Arthur Grant still held power over him, even 20 years after his passing. With a sigh of irritation, Julian changed direction. 15 minutes. Not a second more. The brunette woman was watching the city's hustle and bustle through the window. Hearing the door open, she stood up. Julian estimated she was around 40, dressed discreetly but with an air of determination in her eyes. "Maria, I presume? I'm Julian Grant. I have a very tight schedule today, so—" "Thank you for seeing me," she interrupted, extending her hand firmly. "I know you must be busy. I wouldn't take your time if it weren't absolutely necessary." There was something in her gaze that immediately bothered him. A disturbing familiarity he couldn't quite place. Maria placed a worn leather folder on the table. "These are copies of documents I believe you'll find interesting," she said, opening the folder to reveal yellowed certificates, old photographs, and stamped official papers. The first photograph showed his father, younger, next to a woman who was not his mother. The man was holding a baby, and I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? "For now, just someone looking for answers," Maria replied, pointing to a certificate. "Look at the birth date on this document." Julian took the certificate impatiently. It was a birth certificate for Maria Ramirez, born on March 14, 1983, at St. Jude's Clinic in Denver, Colorado. Next to it, a handwritten note in a script he would recognize anywhere, his father's precise handwriting. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured. "Keep going," Maria insisted. It was a hospital record, with his father's name listed as the attending physician and a list of names and dates. Julian recognized his own name on the list, born in 1980, followed by 3 other names, including Maria's. "What is this? Some kind of extortion?" "I don't want your money, Mr. Grant," she replied with a disturbing calm. "I just want the truth." Julian examined more photographs, adoption papers, medical records, all signed by his father. Her financial report showed large transfers to offshore accounts, all dated from the time his father worked at the clinic. "Why did you come to me?" Maria smiled slightly, a smile that seemed strangely familiar. "I came because I've spent 30 years searching, because I need to find my real family. And because I believe you might be part of it." Julian's world seemed to freeze at that instant. He looked again at the woman in front of him, this time truly observing. The shape of her eyes, her determined chin, the way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke, gestures he saw every day in the mirror. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that, according to these documents, we were born at the same clinic. We have the same biological parents on record, and your father forged documents to erase any connection between us," she answered, her voice now slightly trembling. "I'm saying we could be siblings, Julian." The CEO recoiled as if he had been physically struck. From the top of his empire, built on foundations he always believed were solid, Julian felt the first tremor of an earthquake that threatened to destroy everything. But this was only the beginning of a discovery that would reveal even darker secrets. "Impossible," he murmured. "My Aunt Eleanor would have told me." "Your aunt?" Maria asked, leaning forward. "Eleanor Grant. Is she still alive?" The urgent tone in her voice made Julian pause. "Yes, why?" "Because her name is also on the documents." As a witness in several child transfer processes, Julian grabbed the folder, flipping through it frantically. There was the elegant signature of Eleanor Grant, his aunt and the only maternal figure he had ever known, on dozens of adoption documents. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Julian, wait. There's more. It's not just us two. According to my documents, there are 4 of us." 4. The word echoed in his mind as he took the card Maria handed him. "I'll be at this hotel for 2 weeks. When you're ready to hear the whole truth, look for me." The Grant mansion stood imposingly in Lake Forest. At 75, Eleanor maintained the aristocratic elegance that had always characterized her. Julian found her in the sunroom reading a book under the natural light. "Julian, what a wonderful surprise." "We need to talk, Aunt," he said without preamble, placing the folder on the table. Eleanor's smile wavered slightly. "Of course, dear. Did something happen? I had a visitor today. A woman named Maria. It was only a second." A brief moment when Eleanor's eyes widened before she regained her composure, but it was enough to confirm Julian's suspicions. "I don't know any Maria. About this," Julian spread the documents on the table. "Birth certificates, adoption records, photographs, all involving my father, you, and 4 children. Eleanor settled into her armchair, her gaze now fixed on the documents. "What nonsense is this, Julian? Documents can be forged." "That's what I initially thought," Julian agreed, picking up one of the photographs. "But then I noticed certain details. Like this photo taken in the garden of this very house. You holding a baby that isn't me." Eleanor took the photograph with slightly trembling hands. "That was a long time ago. It was a friend's nephew. The baby has a birthmark on his arm. The same mark Maria showed me today." A heavy silence fell over the sunroom. Eleanor placed the photograph back on the table with a deliberately slow movement. "Julian," she began, her voice now lower, "there are things from the past that were buried for a reason." The implicit confirmation hit Julian like a physical blow. "So it's true. Maria is my sister, and there are others." Eleanor stood up, walking to the window, her back to him. "Your father was a complex man, Julian. He did what he considered necessary to protect the family." "What family, Aunt?" "Apparently I have siblings I never knew about." Eleanor turned to face him, her face now revealing the age she usually managed to disguise. St. Jude's Clinic served women from all social classes. Many couldn't keep their children. Your father facilitated new arrangements. Arrangements? You're talking about human lives, about separated families. I'm talking about opportunities. Children who would have grown up in poverty gained comfortable homes. And what about me? What about Maria? Are we biological siblings? Eleanor hesitated, the first time Julian had seen her genuinely uncertain. "Yes," she finally admitted. "You, Maria, and 2 others. 4 siblings in total." Julian felt dizzy. "My parents, the ones I lost in the accident, weren't my biological parents. Claudia and Arthur loved you more than anything." "Never doubt that. But no, biologically you were born to another mother." "Who? Where is she?" "I don't know. Many records were destroyed when the clinic closed." Julian gently held his aunt's arms, forcing her to look at him. "Why, Aunt? Why separate siblings?" Eleanor pulled away from his touch, walking to a sideboard where she poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. "Your father believed it was better that way, to divide the siblings among different families. As for keeping it a secret, it was to protect you, to ensure you inherited everything without having to share with anyone. You hid my siblings from me because of money. It wasn't just money, Julian. It was the Grant legacy. Your father built an empire and he wanted it to stay in the family. And the other 2? Where are they?" Eleanor sat down again, looking exhausted. "A girl in San Francisco. The boy was adopted by a couple in Austin, Texas. And our biological mother." A flicker of guilt crossed Eleanor's face. "She was very young. A nursing student who worked at the clinic. My father got her pregnant 4 times. No, only once. With twins. You and Maria are twins. The other 2 came later from a different woman." The revelation hit Julian like lightning. Twins? Maria and I are twins? How could you separate twins? It was necessary to protect your father's reputation, the family's reputation. And what about the future of Maria? The others? Our lives were decided because of reputation and money, Eleanor approached him with urgency. Julian, you have to understand. Your father did what he thought was best, at the cost of my true family. Julian looked at his aunt, seeing her in a completely new way. The woman he had admired his whole life now seemed like a stranger. You always knew, didn't you? All these years you always knew and chose to lie. I need the names. The names of all my siblings, the families who adopted them. Julian, please, think this through. This search will only bring pain. How you buried my true identity. No, Aunt, I'm tired of living a lie. I'm going to find my siblings, all of them. Days later, the small coffee shop in Wicker Park was discreet enough for the meeting that could change the lives of the 4 siblings forever. Julian arrived first, dressed casually for the first time in years, feeling vulnerable. Maria and Beatrice arrived together. The doctor from San Francisco had taken a leave from the hospital where she worked for this meeting. The sound of the door opening made the 3 of them look up simultaneously. A man about 35 with dark hair and features that bore an undeniable resemblance to theirs looked around with a tense expression. He wore worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a leather jacket that had seen better days. Luke, Maria called softly. The man walked to the table, his movements cautious. He stopped in front of them, studying each face intensely. So this is it. The family I never knew I had. Julian stood up, extending his hand. I'm Julian. Luke looked at the outstretched hand, hesitated, then shook it firmly. I know who you are. I've seen your face in business magazines. With the 4 of them finally gathered, the silence was broken by Beatrice. It's strange, isn't it? To look at you and see parts of myself I never knew existed. Luke let out a short laugh. I grew up thinking I was the only child of a handyman and a seamstress from Austin. Now I find out I'm the brother of a rich guy, a lawyer and a doctor. What were your adoptive parents like, Luke? Maria asked gently. Simple, hard-working people. My dad drank a lot after games. My mom worked double shifts to make up for it. It wasn't easy. Julian felt guilty thinking about his own privileged childhood. I'm sorry it was difficult. I don't need your pity. Everyone gets what they get in life. It's not pity, it's outrage. To think we grew up separated because of one man's choices. Luke studied him for a moment, then nodded. What exactly did you find out about this man? Our biological father. Maria opened her folder, spreading documents on the table. Dr. Arthur Grant ran St. Jude's Clinic for almost 20 years. Officially, it was a respectable obstetrics clinic. And unofficially? Luke asked. It was an illegal adoption scheme, Beatrice completed. Young pregnant women were convinced to give their babies up for adoption. Julian found a photograph that made him stop. He showed it to his siblings, a smiling young nurse no more than 22. This is Elizabeth Carter, our biological mother, mine and Maria's. And what happened to her? Luke asked. We don't know for sure, Maria replied. The records about her just stop after our birth. It's like she disappeared. What about ours? Luke asked, referring to himself and Beatrice. Annabelle Foster, also a clinic nurse, also disappeared from the records. A heavy silence fell as the 4 contemplated the implications. You think he... Luke left the sentence unfinished. We don't know, Julian answered, but I intend to find out. Luke leaned back in his chair. And what do you plan to do with all this? Your fortune came from this scheme, didn't it? The direct question hit Julian. I'm not going to bury anything. But we need to be careful. We're talking about hundreds of lives that could be affected. And your reputation, of course, Luke commented with irony. The great CEO Julian Grant built an empire on the ruins of destroyed families. Luke, Beatrice intervened, that's not fair. Julian didn't know. He knows now. The question is, what is he going to do about it? Julian faced his brother. I'm going to do whatever it takes to right the wrong our father did, even if it means losing everything. Luke held his gaze, evaluating his sincerity, then nodded. Good, because I didn't come to Chicago for money. I came for answers. And for justice. The investigation that followed would reveal even more shocking truths. Walter Miller, The accountant who had managed the clinic's finances received Julian and Maria in his modest apartment. The man, almost 80, was visibly nervous. I never thought this day would come. I always imagined I'd take these secrets to the grave. You knew about the irregular adoptions? Maria asked. I knew everything. The payments, the transfers to offshore accounts, the money used to acquire properties. And what about the biological mothers? Elizabeth Carter and Annabelle Foster. What happened to them? The old accountant paled. Complicated cases, those. Most of the mothers were poor young women. They'd take the money, go on with their lives. But Elizabeth, she fell in love with Dr. Grant. What promises? Julian asked. That they would stay together, that they would raise the children. When she found out it was a lie, that one of the twins was going to be adopted, she threatened to expose everything. And what did my father do? I don't know the details. I know there was a violent argument at the clinic. The next day, Dr. Grant asked me to prepare a large amount of cash. He said Elizabeth had agreed to leave. But you didn't believe him. No, especially after I saw Eleanor agitated, nervous, and there were stains on her clothes, stains that looked like blood. Julian's blood ran cold. Eleanor was involved? Eleanor always protected her brother. She would do anything for him. And Annabelle Foster? That case was different. She really accepted the money. She wanted to start over far from the clinic. Dr. Grant was persistent with the young nurses. And the financial records. I kept copies of everything, Walter revealed, handing over a dusty box. I thought someday someone would come looking for answers. There's one more thing, the accountant said. 6 months after Elizabeth's disappearance, Eleanor bought a secluded property in the countryside. A farm in rural Wisconsin, paid in cash. The final confrontation with Eleanor would reveal the most shocking truth of all. I asked you to come alone, Eleanor said, seeing Maria with Julian. I have no more secrets from my sister. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her. We came to know the truth about Elizabeth and about the property in Wisconsin. Eleanor's face visibly paled. Your father wasn't a bad man, just a determined one. The adoption started as a social service. When he realized how many wealthy families were willing to pay for healthy babies, everything changed. And Elizabeth? What happened to her? Eleanor turned to face them, her eyes shining with tears. She was different. Arthur truly fell in love with her. When the twins were born, he proposed a solution. He would keep one of the babies as adopted by him and Claudia. The other would be adopted by a good family, but she didn't accept. No, she threatened to report everything, to take the story to the newspapers. There was a terrible fight. She was hysterical, threatening to take the babies away. In the midst of the confusion, she fell, hit her head. It was an accident. An accident? Julian repeated, incredulous. She didn't die immediately. She was alive but unconscious. Arthur panicked. Taking her to the hospital would mean questions. So we took her to the farm in Wisconsin. You kidnapped her? Left her without medical attention? Arthur was a doctor. He took care of her the best he could. But the injury was severe. She never fully regained consciousness. She was in a vegetative state. A stunned silence filled the office. For how long? Julian asked, his voice choked. Years. We hired discreet nurses. She was cared for. Until about 10 years ago. You're telling me our mother was alive until 2015, kept as a prisoner in a vegetative state, and you separated us, lied all these years? It was to protect you. To protect the family. Protect? You destroyed lives. That's not protection, it's a monstrosity. Does the farm still exist? Is she buried there? Eleanor nodded slowly. In the rose garden. It was the only place that got sunlight all day. We're going there now, and you're coming with us. Meanwhile, in Portland, Beatrice and Luke found Annabelle Foster in her modest home. The woman, around 60, greeted them with a smile that quickly disappeared when she realized who they were. Mrs. Annabelle Foster? Yes, that's me. I'm Beatrice Martins, and this is Luke Ferreira. We'd like to talk about something important. Annabelle studied the two. Her expression changed, a mix of recognition and alarm taking over her face. Come in. You know who we are, don't you? Luke asked directly. I thought this day would never come. So it's true. You're our biological mother. Annabelle nodded, tears welling in her eyes. How did you find me? Why did you leave us? Luke's question came out harsh. Why did you agree to separate us? It wasn't a real choice, Luke. I was young, scared, without resources. Dr. Grant was powerful. When he found out I was pregnant, he presented everything as a done deal. And you just accepted it? Not immediately. I tried to negotiate. I wanted to keep at least one of you. That's when he showed me photographs of Elizabeth, the state she was in after the accident. He threatened you? Yes. He told me the same thing could happen to me if I caused problems. Annabelle then described the operation of St. Jude's Clinic. How poor women were convinced, how wealthy families paid fortunes, how documents were falsified. And why didn't you report it later? Fear and shame, too. She hesitated, looking at Luke, and when I finally gathered the courage, I found out you were in a difficult situation. What do you mean? I looked for you, discreetly. Beatrice was doing well, but you, Luke, were in a precarious situation. Your adoptive father drank, there was violence. I started sending money anonymously. Luke's eyes widened. Those envelopes with no return address. It was all I could do without raising suspicion. Why didn't you try to make direct contact when I became an adult? Shame and fear that you would hate me. The trip to the farm in Wisconsin would reveal the final chapter of the tragedy. The road wound through mountains covered in dense forest. The farm appeared after a curve, a large colonial-style house surrounded by gardens partially taken over by vegetation. Where? Maria asked simply. Eleanor pointed to the right. The rose garden. It was her favorite place. In the moments when she seemed conscious, the three walked in silence. The rose garden appeared, a semicircular area with flowering bushes. In the center, a particularly large rose bush stood out. There, Eleanor indicated. Julian and Maria approached the central rose bush. There was no headstone, just red flowers swaying in the breeze. How could they? Maria murmured, kneeling. How could they do this to her? Julian wanted to see the house, the place where she had been all those years. Eleanor guided them to a large room at the back of the house. It was here. We turned it into a sick room. There was medical equipment, nurses on shifts. The room was empty. Only the base of a hospital bed remained as a witness. She could see the sunset from here, Eleanor commented, as if that would mitigate the crime. How considerate of him to keep her a prisoner, but with a view of the sunset. The sound of a car interrupted the conversation. Beatrice, Luke, and Annabelle arrived, creating a moment of reunion charged with emotion and tension. Before the rosebush, Annabelle knelt and gently touched the earth. I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. Your children are here now. All of them. Together at last. The four siblings formed a semicircle around the rosebush, each lost in thought and emotion. What do we do now? Beatrice asked. With all of this? Julian looked at his siblings. We have to do what's right, even if it costs me everything I have. 3 months later, the headquarters of Grant Enterprises had been transformed into a coordination center for the Project Reconnect, an initiative to locate families separated by the St. Jude's Clinic scheme. 3 more families confirmed this week, Maria announced. 2 mothers who were told their babies had died just confirmed DNA with children we found. The agreement with the district attorney's office was finalized. Julian pledged to use most of his fortune to identify and assist all the victims of the scheme. And families have already been identified and reconnected, Luke presented at the press conference, with estimates that the total number could exceed 300. When asked how much of his wealth was being directed to the project, Julian replied, approximately 70% of all assets. I'm keeping just enough to ensure the operation of the companies that employ thousands of people. Luke, who had surprised everyone with his evolution, reflected. To discover your whole life was built on lies is devastating. But I also discovered something I never had, a family. Beatrice added, our personal story is now at the service of something bigger. Every family we reunite brings healing not just for those involved, but for a social wound that remained ignored for decades. Julian concluded, we choose to be together now. Not out of obligation, but because we decided to turn a tragedy into something meaningful. After the official exhumation and proper reburial of Elizabeth in a dignified grave, The four siblings established a tradition of Sunday dinners. Annabel, after many difficult conversations, especially with Luke, had been integrated into the family. "A toast," Annabel said, raising her glass, "to new beginnings and rebuilt families." On the balcony of Julian's penthouse, with a nighttime view of Chicago, Maria verbalized everyone's thought. "Sometimes I wonder, if we hadn't been separated, what would our lives have been like? What matters," she continued, "is who we choose to be now, with the knowledge we have, with the truth revealed." "I choose to be your brother," Julian said. "I choose this family, imperfect and late as it is." "I choose this family too," Beatrice echoed, extending her hand to the center of the circle they formed. "And me," Luke added, placing his hand over Beatrice's. "And me," Maria completed, joining her hand with the others. Julian placed his hand on top, completing the circle. Four siblings separated by fate, united by truth. But there was still one last secret to be revealed. Days later, an unexpected letter arrived. The sender was unknown, Dr. Charles Mendelsohn, former director of a hospital in Cleveland. "Dear Mr. Grant," the letter read, "I read about your search for families separated by St. Jude's Clinic. I need to share information that may interest you. I worked with your father on some special cases. There are details about the fate of the biological mothers that were never revealed." Julian gathered his siblings in his office the next morning. Annabel was also present, having moved to Chicago permanently after deciding to actively participate in Project Reconnect. "I received this letter yesterday," Julian announced, reading it aloud. "Dr. Mendelsohn wants to meet with us. He says he has information about what really happened to the mothers. It could be a trap," Luke warned. "Someone trying to take advantage of the publicity. Or it could be our chance to discover the whole truth," Maria replied. "We checked his credentials. Dr. Charles Mendelsohn is real, worked at St. Vincent's Hospital for 30 years, retired 5 years ago." Beatrice looked at Annabel. "Do you know him? Does the name mean anything?" Annabel frowned, thoughtful. "Charles. Yes, I remember him. He was one of the doctors who sometimes received our patients when there were complications at the clinic. An honorable man, as I recall." "Then we'll meet him," Julian decided, all together. The meeting was scheduled at Dr. Mendelsohn's own office. The man, about 70, received them with gravity, his demeanor indicating that he carried heavy information. "Thank you for coming," he said, studying each face. "You are exactly as I imagined. Genetics don't lie." He led them to a private room, where a table was covered with old medical files. "I worked with your father for almost 10 years, Dr. Mendelsohn began, addressing Julian primarily. "At first I believed he was doing a noble job, helping women in distress. Over time I realized the truth." "What truth?" Maria asked. The adoptions were only one part of the scheme. There was something more systematic, more cruel. Dr. Mendelsohn opened one of the files, revealing detailed medical records. "Your father wasn't just facilitating adoptions. He was conducting a social experiment. He selected young, intelligent, good-looking women. He deliberately got them pregnant, using methods they were unaware of." The silence in the room was deafening. Annabel visibly paled. "Experiment?" Julian murmured, his voice barely audible. "He believed he could create a superior generation. He used his own genetic material, combined with women he considered genetically suitable. You weren't accidents. You were planned." Luke stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "Are you saying we're products of an experiment? That he created us like lab rats?" "Not lab rats, prototypes. Arthur Grant believed he was improving the human race. Each of you was sent to different environments on purpose, wealthy, middle class, poor, to test how superior genetics would react to varied conditions." Beatrice held Annabel's hand, which was visibly trembling. "And the mothers? What really happened?" Dr. Mendelsohn opened another file. The ones who resisted, like Elizabeth, were silenced, but there were others. "Annabel, do you remember the injections you received during pregnancy?" Annabel nodded slowly. "He said they were vitamins. They weren't. They were experimental hormones. Some women had severe adverse reactions. 3 died during the treatments. Their bodies were disposed of." "Oh my God," Maria whispered. "How many women? How many children?" From the records I managed to keep, at least 20 women were used in the experiment. You four are the only known survivors of the first generations. Julian turned to face the doctor. Why are you telling us this now? Why did you keep these records all these years? Because I always knew that one day the truth would come out. And because, he hesitated, because one of the women who died was my daughter. The impact of the revelation left everyone in shock. Dr. Mendelsohn continued. His voice choked. Julia was 24. She was a medical student, brilliant, beautiful. Your father convinced her to participate in what he called a pioneering reproductive medicine project. She died in the 10th week of pregnancy. Officially, it was a rare complication. In truth, it was a reaction to the experimental hormones. Annabelle covered her face with her hands. I could have died too. Yes, you were lucky. Your body reacted well to the treatments. That's why you were able to have 2 healthy children. Luke returned to the table, leaning on it with force. And the others? The other children from the experiment? Most didn't survive the first year. Heart problems, neurological deficiencies. You four are exceptions. Julian felt nauseous. Our company, our reconnection project. We're just scratching the surface of something much worse. Yes, Dr. Mendelsohn confirmed. And there's more. Your father documented everything. There were plans for a second generation. You as adults would be encouraged to reproduce among yourselves or with carefully selected partners. Incest, Maria almost shouted. He planned for us to reproduce with our siblings, not directly with you, but with other products of the experiment from partner clinics. There was a network, Mr. Grant. Your father wasn't working alone. Julian's world was collapsing for the second time. First he discovered he was adopted, then that his biological mother was held prisoner. Now he was discovering that his entire existence was the product of a eugenic experiment. Where are these documents? Maria asked the lawyer, taking control. We need proof. Dr. Mendelsohn handed them a key. There's a safe deposit box at a bank in Cleveland. I stored everything there. Documents, photographs, correspondence between the doctors involved. Names, dates, locations of other clinics. Why now? Julian insisted. Why didn't you expose this before? Because I feared the consequences, and because you were innocent children. But now that you've reunited, that you're actively seeking the truth, the time has come to reveal everything. Beatrice, who had remained silent, finally spoke. How many doctors were involved? Does the network still exist? Or at least 12 doctors in 7 states. Some have already died, others are still alive. The network disbanded after Arthur's death, but some may have continued individually. Annabelle stood up abruptly. I need to leave. I need to process all this. Luke accompanied her, leaving the 3 siblings with Dr. Mendelsohn. There's something else, the doctor said when they were alone, about Eleanor. She wasn't just an accomplice. She was the financial coordinator of the entire operation. Julian clenched his fists. She knew everything. More than that. She suggested the initial experiment. It was her idea to use young women as breeders. Arthur was brilliant, but Eleanor was the mastermind behind the organization. The pieces finally fell into place. Eleanor wasn't just a protective sister who helped hide crimes. She was the architect of the entire operation. Does she still have contacts? Maria asked. Is the network still active? I'm not sure, but I suspect so. You found separated families very easily. Perhaps you were directed. Julian and Maria exchanged worried glances. Was it possible that their own project was being manipulated? We need to go to the bank in Cleveland, Julian decided. We need to see all the documents. And then? Maria asked. Then we decide what to do with the full truth, even if it destroys everything we believe about ourselves. 2 days later, at the bank's safe deposit box in Cleveland, the 4 siblings found themselves facing decades of documents that revealed the full extent of the horror. Photographs of dozens of young women, detailed medical records, correspondence between doctors discussing results and specimens, plans to expand the program to other countries. And at the bottom of the box, a personal diary of Arthur Grant. Julian read aloud, Project Genesis, Year 7. The first 4 prototypes are developing as expected. Julian demonstrates leadership and ambition even when raised in a privileged environment. Maria shows superior analytical intelligence. Beatrice developed empathy and natural medical skills. Luke, despite the adverse environment, maintains remarkable resilience and determination. He was watching us, Beatrice murmured. Our entire childhood. Maria continued reading. Eleanor suggests starting the second phase when they reach reproductive maturity. Combine Julian and Maria with products from the Portland and Austin clinics. Beatrice and Luke can be crossed with specimens from San Francisco and Boston. Luke threw the document away, furious. We're lab animals to him. Our whole lives were planned, observed, controlled. Julian found a list of names at the end of the documents. Doctors, nurses, administrators, some people still alive, others already dead. And at the top of the list, a name that made him stop. Dr. Patricia Vasquez, New Hope Clinic, Boston. Status, active. This clinic is still operating, he said, showing the document to the others. Look at the date of the last update, March of this year. 3 months ago, Beatrice calculated. The network still exists. Maria picked up the phone. I'm calling our legal team. We need to report this immediately. District Attorney, FBI, the media. Wait, Julian interrupted. If we report it now without more proof, they can destroy evidence. We need a strategy. Luke, who had calmed down, nodded. Julian's right. We need to be smart. Annabelle, who had remained silent throughout the discovery, finally spoke. There's something I haven't told you yet. Everyone turned to her. During my pregnancy, I received visits from a woman. She introduced herself as a social worker, but now I realize she was evaluating me, asking questions about my family, my intelligence, my abilities. What did she look like? Beatrice asked. Elegant, well-dressed, grey hair, very polite. She said her job was to make sure the mothers were well cared for. Julian felt his heart race. Eleanor? Yes, Annabelle confirmed. It was Eleanor. She evaluated me as if I were a broodmare. The anger Julian felt was different from anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't just discovering he was adopted, or that his biological mother was held prisoner. It was discovering that his entire existence was the product of an inhumane experiment, coordinated by the only person he had ever trusted. We're going to confront her, he decided, now all together. Julian, Maria touched his arm, are you sure? After we do this, there's no going back. He looked at his siblings, at Annabelle. He had the scattered documents that revealed decades of horror. There's been no going back for a long time. The Grant mansion seemed smaller when the 5 of them arrived. Eleanor was waiting for them in the sunroom, as if she knew they would come. I thought you'd show up eventually, she said calmly, without getting up from her armchair. You found out about Charles, didn't you? Julian placed the documents on the table in front of her. We found out about everything, Eleanor. Project Genesis, the experiments, your coordination of everything. Eleanor examined the documents without surprise. Arthur never knew how to keep secrets properly. How could you? Luke shouted. How could you treat people like lab animals? We created you, Eleanor replied coldly. We gave you life, purpose, superior potential. You should be thanking us. Maria advanced, but Julian held her back. You murdered innocent women, Julian said, forcing himself to stay calm. You separated families. You experimented on human beings. We made necessary sacrifices for the advancement of humanity, Eleanor retorted. In 100 years, you and your descendants will be remembered as the pioneers of a new superior species. We are people, not prototypes, Beatrice yelled. Eleanor smiled coldly. You are my masterpiece. Julian, a natural leader. Maria, analytical intelligence. Beatrice, empathy and medical skill. Luke, resilience despite adversity, each perfect in your function. And now? Julian asked. Does the network still work? Are women still being used? The project continues, of course. Boston, Miami, Phoenix. We have a new generation being prepared. Annabelle could no longer contain herself. You're monsters! All of you are monsters. Eleanor turned to her with disdain. You should feel honored. Your children are superior to anything you could have produced naturally. It was the final straw. Julian advanced, but Maria stopped him. She's not worth it, she said. She's not worth our anger. We have work to do. What work? Eleanor asked, curious. To expose everything, Beatrice replied. Every clinic, every doctor, every crime. And destroy your own legacy in the process? Eleanor smiled. You are products of the project. Exposing it means exposing your own origin. I'd rather be seen as the product of an experiment than an accomplice to a crime, Julian declared. And the others? The products from the other clinics? Are you going to destroy their lives too? We're going to give them the choice we never had, Maria replied. The choice to know the truth. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Naive idealists. The world doesn't want the truth. It wants comfort, security, illusions. Maybe, Luke agreed. But we deserve more than illusions. That night, the four siblings worked until dawn, organizing decades of evidence. Documents were digitized, letters were transcribed, lists were compiled. At sunrise, Julian made the first call. Dr. Patricia Vasquez? My name is Julian Grant. I need to talk to you about Project Genesis. Silence on the other end of the line. Dr. Vasquez? Are you still there? Vassie, how did you get this number? The voice was tense. That doesn't matter. What matters is that we know everything. About the clinics, the experiments, the murdered women. I don't know what you're talking about. I know you do. And I know you have 15 minutes to turn yourself in at a police station before I hand all the evidence over to the FBI. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. I have my father's documents, Dr. Mendelssohn's records, and 4 victims willing to testify. A long silence. What do you want? I want the complete list. All the clinics, all the people involved, all the victims who are still alive. And in return? In return, we'll consider a plea deal. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. 2 hours later, Dr. Patricia Vasquez was sitting in the conference room of the New Bonds Foundation, surrounded by lawyers and investigators. The project began in 1975, she confessed. Dr. Arthur Grant believed he could create a superior race through selective reproduction and hormonal experimentation. How many women? Maria asked. At least 200 in 12 clinics. Most died during the experiments or shortly after childbirth. And how many children survived? 23 that we know of. You 4 are from the first successful generation. Beatrice wrote down every word. Where are the other 19? Scattered across the country. Some know they're adopted, others don't. Most live normal lives, without suspecting their origins. We want the names and addresses, Julian demanded. Some may not want to know the truth. That decision is theirs to make, not ours. Dr. Vasquez handed over a handwritten list. These are all the known survivors of Project Genesis. Julian examined the names. Some were familiar. He had seen them in newspapers, magazines. One was a famous lawyer in Boston. Another, a renowned researcher in San Francisco. A third was a judge in New York. All successful, Maria noted. The experiment worked, at least partially. It didn't work, Luke corrected firmly. People aren't experiments. Families aren't laboratories. But you are superior, Dr. Vasquez insisted. Look at what you've achieved, each in your own field. We achieved it in spite of the experiment, not because of it, Beatrice replied. And we paid a terrible price. In the following weeks, Julian and his siblings embarked on the most difficult mission of their lives, contacting the other 19 survivors of Project Genesis. Some reacted with shock and denial, others with anger and accusations, a few with gratitude for finally knowing their origins. Dr. Alexander Costa, the lawyer from Boston, flew to Chicago the day after the initial contact. I always knew there was something different about my adoption, he confessed at the meeting with the 4 siblings. My adoptive parents were evasive about details, and I always had abilities that seemed to have no origin. Abilities? Maria asked. Photographic memory, superior analytical skills, above-average physical stamina. I thought it was just good genes. It was genetic manipulation, Julian corrected. Our father used experimental hormones on our biological mothers. Dr. Costa examined the documents. My biological mother? What happened to her? According to the records, she died of complications during the experiment. Officially, it was listed as death by eclampsia. The lawyer clenched his fists. And my biological father, Dr. Roberto Vasquez, Dr. Patricia's brother. He was in charge of the Boston clinic. My own father raised me as a lab rat. We were all lab rats, Luke said. The question is, what do we do with this information now? Dr. Costa didn't hesitate. Full exposure, justice for all the victims, total destruction of the network. Not all the survivors reacted positively. Dr. Clara Mendoza, a researcher in San Francisco, refused to participate in the investigation. "I don't care how I was conceived," she declared by phone. "I have a brilliant career, a family I love. I'm not going to destroy everything because of events that happened before my birth." "But other people might be suffering now," Beatrice argued. "The network might still be active. That's not my problem. Let the past stay in the past." 5 survivors refused any contact. 7 agreed to cooperate with the investigation. 6 asked for time to decide. But it was enough. With the evidence collected and the testimony of multiple victims, the FBI launched Operation Genesis, the largest investigation of crimes against humanity in the medical history of the United States. 12 doctors were arrested. 7 clinics were shut down. Dozens of families were reunited with victims they believed had been dead for decades. Eleanor Grant, at 76, was sentenced to 40 years in prison for conspiracy, qualified homicide, kidnapping, falsification of documents, and crimes against humanity. During the trial, she maintained her defiant posture. "You don't understand what we achieved," she declared from the witness stand. "We created superior human beings. In 50 years, when mediocrity dominates the world, you will remember our work with gratitude." Julian, Maria, Beatrice, and Luke watched the verdict side by side. When the sentence was read, they felt not vindication, but a deep sadness for the woman Eleanor could have been, for the victims who would never see justice, for the families who would never be reunited. After the trial, the 4 siblings walked in silence through downtown Chicago. It was a fall afternoon, the sky tinged with orange and pink. "It's strange," Maria finally commented. "We spent months searching for the truth, and now that we have it, I don't know if I feel any better." "The truth doesn't always bring relief," Beatrice replied. "Sometimes it just brings clarity." "And responsibility," Luke added. "Now we know. We can't feign ignorance." Julian stopped, looking at the Grant Enterprises building in the distance. "Do you think we really are superior? That the experiments worked?" "It doesn't matter," Maria said. "Even if we are smarter, stronger, more capable, it doesn't justify how we were created. And it doesn't define who we are," Beatrice completed. "We are the choices we make, not the genes we carry." Luke smiled for the first time in days. "Then I choose to be a brother. I choose this strange and traumatized family." "Me too," the other 3 echoed. A year later, the New Bonds Foundation had expanded internationally. Similar cases were discovered in Canada, the UK, and Australia. The network of medical experimentation was larger than they had imagined, but it was finally being dismantled. Julian sold Grant Enterprises, directing all the resources to the family reunification work. Maria opened a law firm specializing in victims' rights. Beatrice led research on generational trauma. Luke created a support program for victims from humble backgrounds. Annabelle became the official spokesperson for the foundation, telling her story to global audiences and inspiring other victims to come forward. On a warm summer night, the 5 of them gathered on the balcony of Julian's new home. Smaller, simpler, but full of photographs and shared memories. "I read about a case in Germany today," Maria commented. "Nazi doctors who continued experiments after the war. Our story isn't unique, but our response can be," Julian replied. "How many times have victims of experiments united to expose an entire network?" "It's our legacy," Beatrice said. "Not as products of experiments, but as survivors who chose justice." Annabelle stood up to leave. "Thank you," she said simply, "for including me, for letting me be a part of this family." After she left, the 4 siblings remained on the balcony, watching the stars. "Sometimes I wonder," Luke said, "what our lives would have been like if our true parents had raised us together." "Probably simpler," Maria replied. "Certainly less traumatic, but maybe less meaningful," Julian added. "Our pain connected us in a way that happiness might not have been able to." "I prefer to think," Beatrice said, "that we found a purpose in our tragedy, that we transformed our suffering into something that can help others." Months later, at an international ceremony in Geneva, the 4 Grant siblings received the United Nations Human Rights Award for their work in exposing illegal medical experiments. In his acceptance speech, Julian said, "We are products of an experiment that tried to reduce human beings to genetic variables. But we discovered that humanity is not in our genes, it's in our choices. We chose to seek the truth when it was easier to live a lie. We chose justice when it was safer to remain silent. We chose to be a family when it would have been simpler to remain strangers. Maria continued, "Our story shows that the greatest tragedies can generate the deepest connections. That the truth, however painful, is always preferable to the most comfortable of lies." Beatrice added, "We dedicate this award to the victims who did not survive, to the mothers who could never hug their children again, and to all who are still searching for their true origins." Luke concluded, "And we promise to continue fighting so that no child is ever again separated from their family by greed, prejudice, or delusions of superiority, because family is not defined by genes or experiments. It's defined by love, choice, and mutual commitment." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Camera flashes captured the moment. 4 siblings, united not by the science that created them, but by the humanity they chose to embrace. That night at their hotel in Geneva, the 4 gathered for a final toast. "To the future," Julian said, raising his glass. "To the families we will reunite," Maria added. "To the truths we will reveal," Beatrice contributed. "And to the siblings we finally found," Luke completed. They drank in silence, knowing that in the morning they would return to work, not as products of an experiment, but as architects of a world where truth prevails over secrecy, where justice triumphs over power, and where family means choice, not just blood. Years later, when they told their full story to future generations, they would not only talk about the pain of separation or the horror of the experiments discovered. They would talk about the transformative power of truth, the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity, and the infinite capacity of people to create meaningful connections even in the most improbable circumstances. Because in the end, the true victory was not exposing the crimes of the past, but building a future where such crimes became impossible, and where 4 strangers, separated by decades of lies, could finally become what they were always meant to be: a family united by choice, strengthened by truth, and dedicated to ensuring that no other family would be destroyed by greed or scientific arrogance. The legacy of the Grant siblings would not be defined by the experiments that created them, but by the justice they brought to the world. A justice built not on revenge, but on the fundamental belief that every person deserves to know their true story, find their true family, and live free from the lies that others built around them. And so, 4 lives that began as scientific experiments were transformed into definitive proof that humanity can never be reduced to formulas, equations, or ambitions. That true love grows not in laboratories, but in the daily choice to care for one another, and that the strongest family is not one created by genes, but one forged in the conscious decision to stay together, no matter what the world may reveal about their origins. This is the story of the Grant siblings, 4 people who discovered that, even when everything in their lives was a lie, they could still choose to live the truth. And in that choice, they found not only each other, but also themselves. The end of the story. To all you awesome viewers, we hope the journey of the Grant siblings touched your hearts. To keep up with more incredible stories like this one, we've put together a special playlist you can find by clicking the link on the screen. If this narrative of discovery and family reconciliation resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We bring you new stories every day that explore the complexities of life, family secrets, and the power of the bonds that connect us. Stick around so you don't miss our next videos, which promise to be just as impactful as this story of the 4 siblings who found out it's never too late to discover your true origins.